I'm going to cover several subjects, try to get this done, mostly out of spite with myself and my own screw-ups. This is going to be on firearms, not firearm culture, or politics. Mostly because it's an interesting subject. Let's get into it. Firing pins hit primers. The primers on a bullet can be center fire, which means it's a separate component that's added to the cartridge, or it can be integral, as in rim fire, which is almost exclusively 22 caliber pistol and rifle cartridges, the ones that have that weird shape where they're hit off center because they have to hit the edge of the cartridge's rim. Okay? And anything above 22 caliber cartridge diameter is going to most likely be center fire. And yes, they make center fire 22s, but they're very, very uncommon. And a 22 caliber can be necked down to 17 caliber pellet gun size to take advantage of pellet gun barrels, and use that to fire up an actual bullet. It's just really tiny. Now I'm going to give you the dimensions of the primers, but only what is impacting them. The firing pin. It can be a pin that free floats. Those are called inertial or free floating. It could be a hammer with an indentation sticking out of it, or a pin sticking out to be the firing pin. It could be a surface that has a flat area with a pin in it that suddenly moves backwards and shoves the shell into it. That's actually something that exists. I didn't know that existed. And it could also be the entire back of the bullet being hit by a blade shape. 22 caliber is done this way, where it hits 2 or 3 points, sometimes 4, to make sure it goes off, because they're notorious for not having that edge completely working as a primer. So what's the depth of impact? Let's start with that one, because that's got the most variation. We're going to talk about the 22 rimfire because I'm going to use this as a way to help you remember it. 22 caliber and 223 all refer to 22 hundredths of an inch, or 223 thousandths of an inch. So it's 0.2 something is 22. We're going to call it that range. So how deep do you hit a rimfire cartridge? Because it's hitting on the edge, it doesn't have to hit very deep because it's already a tiny space, because that rim is supposed to be really, really thick, but a really tiny space. Well, it hits at 0.028 to 0.035 thickness of impact. Now, 22s are really, really horrifyingly consistent. So let's use this as a starting point. If the diameter of that bullet is 0.2 something, and its impact depth on the primer is 0.02, you could say it's nearly a tenth the thickness. It's not really like that, but you could use that as a way to memorize the numbers. Now, what happens if you double it? You could end up with something, well, let's say 0.6, 0.06, 0.03, that kind of range. That matches shotguns, rifles, and handguns for center fire, because they're rated for depth of impact of 0.050 to 0.060 and 0.055 and 0.065. You can read it below. Now that's the depth of impact. It has nothing to do with those cartridges, but the little primers they have, if you're not aware of it, are almost the same size in the shotguns as a 22 caliber bullet. So this makes it really easy to memorize these things. And the other ones that are rifle and handgun primers are a different size. They're actually smaller, but they have the same crush distance because they're built off of a shape like this being impacted, or a shape like this where it's impacted towards this. This is the part here that it hits on the other side of the metal. If it's shaped like this, integrated into the bullet is another one. So it hits like that. The casing, excuse me. So what that means is that crushing distance is what you're dealing with. And it's about double the depth that it has to hit. In a 22 caliber bullet, you have the back of the bullet, and then the rim, and then a little space here where the primer material is, and then the rest of the casing. It's formed from one stamped piece of metal. And they keep them very consistent, but they have to make it just big enough to fill in that area with something to hit. And it's made tough enough that you can just tap on the edge and it won't go off. You have to crush it. And you don't have to crush it as much distance because it doesn't have much distance to go. So that gives you an idea that rimfire cartridges are the only outlier, and all of these are 0.06 inches or thereabouts, because that's the midpoint. And on the 22 calibers, it's basically 0.03 instead of 0.06. Pretty simple. Some new firing pin blanks are made extra long to allow for trimming after insertion through a breech face. So how long they have to be is based on each gun. That's why they're made just generalized. That's why there's no real answer for it. But what about the diameter? It's based on the hole the pin goes through. But the generalized diameters, if you're not aware of it, I'm going to list for shotguns only, because they're the only things that are very consistent, is it's about a little bit larger than what a BB gun pellet is. It's 17 caliber? Well, no, it's 18.6 caliber diameter. It's like hitting it with the back end of a pellet gun. And that's based on it being a 209 cartridge for shotguns. And the tip, the actual impactor, the part that hits that has to crush to that depth, based on its curvature, is 0.13 inches. So if it's 0.13 inches in its diameter, the actual circle outlying edge, the circle we're going to imagine looping down here, and it crushes in for a distance that's exactly half of this diameter, that's what it is. It's around BB size. So it's literally hitting the ass end of the shotgun shell with a BB gun pellet. That's what it's based on. A BB gun pellet glued to the back of something hitting it. That's it. So, yeah. It's 0.13 and the outside edge is 0.18 or 0.12. It's basically a sort of the end of a spherical shape on the end of a bar. It's not really those dimensions, but that's pretty close. And they almost always neck down. They always have to do that because the pin has to be literally completely straight. It can't be tapered or anything because it has to go in and out to hit the bullet and have very little gap for any pressure to escape. That way it won't have any back pressure. If it was necked down as a pointy thing, some of them do this, but very few of them do. If it necked down like this, the pressure would just pop it out. If it was necked out, it couldn't move. If it's straight, it can work and it can keep the pressure stabilized and prevent the bullet from shooting anything back out. That's why you get primers that shoot out and break open sometimes. Inertia type firing pins that move freely after you hit them and they go toink, spring loaded back, are also exceptions to every generalized rule. So if you were looking up how to do a proper primer, depth, impact, blah, 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 it's based on whatever gun you have a hold of. If you want to build one from scratch, base it on making it half the diameter of the full size of the crushable area in the primer. And if it's a 22, just look at another 22. That was the first thing I wanted to cover. Now, I have some opinions I want to post, but honestly, I'm going to go ahead and do something completely different here. So, I'm going to be doing an announcement about videos I was going to upload on the channel that got crippled because someone didn't like my playlists. None of this makes sense. It's not supposed to. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Chuck Hawk's bullet diameter list for rifles, pistols, and extra that use each other's caliber versus ones that use different calibers. I've expressed the diameters for cartridges and bullets as being in caliber, millimeter, inches, and type last. If you're not aware of it, you can get a 410 shotgun shell that has a chamber that'll fit all sorts of crazy bullets you'd never ever want to fire out of a shotgun. It's a 410 shotgun, but the pressure in them is as bad or worse than it is in a 12 gauge. They are over-engineered freaking pieces of equipment. That's why I'm studying them. I mean, I thought engine designs were crazy. Seriously, guns are crazy. 100,000 PSI, impulse ratings are insane. Next thing was the FBI ammunition penetration protocol tests, don't say that too fast, for gelatin, wood, cloth, drywall, auto glass, and auto metal sheeting. Practical tests by the FBI. Who knew? And then them basing it on, fun fact, using not just a pellet gun for making sure they get the same depth consistently between tests so that the gelatin isn't a variable, but almost advocating for the use of a specific pellet gun, as it's a Crossman, for testing the gelatin. It has to be these parameters. The only gun on the planet that matches it is a specific make and model, a 1970s or 1990s Crossman pellet gun. There's the only two. So yeah. I was going to do a video on that, and I will. And now I'm going to bring up one of the things I want to bring up in the video. I've decided to put this at the end and hope that the battery doesn't go dead while I do it. Google's algorithm, not YouTube's, doesn't work. Google is a company that makes money off of having an artificial intelligence machine you are supposed to trust with your money to do advertising. A long time ago, people would make fun of companies, on TV, by the way, that were into advertising. What is he? Oh, he's an advertising executive. That was a big deal at one time because you can make a shit ton of money being an advertising executive. You arrange advertising campaigns to make billions of dollars these days. And YouTube and Google runs an artificial intelligence routine trying to maximize their game. This is like you running a bot to play a video game or play poker online. It's a big goddamn deal. And their AI bot gets confused by basic shit like a playlist. Now I want you to think about that. Large corporations on this planet are paying a company a fuck ton of money, trying to make a fuck ton of money. Doing something that at one time, I don't know if you know why this joke is done, advertising may or may not be worth paying money for. You get real customers by word of mouth. Everybody knows that. You can't pay for that, but you can try to influence it. But now these days, advertising is such a big business that Google as a corporation literally makes money off of nothing but advertisement revenue. They get paid money, and it is not based on being able to be seen on a YouTube video done by PewDiePie. It is based on their AI bot not being wrong. And it is. Every time they flag one of these channels like me, I mean, we're not important, but every time the AI bot replies and says, we have done this for you, and we have reviewed it and found out we were never wrong. Every time Google as a company lies about how defective their AI bot is, because everybody knows that when your channel's flagged, it's either flagged by a person or flagged by YouTube and Google, or it's flagged by the bot. You're not allowed to, everybody's found out about this. Whistleblowers have already said this. You're not allowed to tell the YouTube bot it's wrong. I've only got them to reply, yes, it was wrong, a couple of times, and it takes days. But if you get an immediate response saying, we are justified in flagging your video, when obviously they're not, that means no human looked at it. That means they're not going to contradict that damn bot. The bot has said high confidence level that this is a bad file. And if it is a bad file, that's great. But if it's not a bad file, it made a massive mistake and they're not correcting it. I'm not just whining because of me. I want you to understand this. We all trust Google not to fuck up. And they showed advertisements to children because they weren't supposed to. But what if they showed them advertisements that were inappropriate? What if they couldn't figure out that somebody's spending their entire day watching finger family videos and watching ABCs as entertainment to occupy themselves so that mom doesn't have to pay for a babysitter? What if they couldn't figure out somebody who was obviously a child was a child and showed them an advertisement that was inappropriate? And what if they were willing to throw $170 million down the shitter so that you wouldn't find out about it? Do you realize how absolutely mind-fuckingly terrifying it is to think that this large corporation is running an unchecked, actual fucking AI that has the ability to tell people you don't have the right to speak for a week or forever on our platform, and gets it wrong all the time? And Google won't tell the computer no. There's a rule I've had for a long time. If you are not allowed to tell a computer no, the computer has to be turned off or destroyed. A computer that disobeys a human is always wrong. This is a basic principle in computing. And Google is ignoring it. It's not Google don't be evil. It's Google don't let the fucking T-800s come loose. I want you to think about that. What other shit are we trusting to this company? And yeah, I'm sounding like a conspiracy theorist. The trouble is, I'm actually thinking this may be real. If you have advertising going through Google and they don't weekly tell you why they're doing this shit to us, we're the test bunnies. We're the rats in the maze. We're the guinea pigs, and they're failing. They don't correct that? Then how the fuck are they supposed to correct it when it does something worse? Remember, Google used to have Google Wallet and had access to your internet and your bank account? They have access to all your phones now. They don't correct the mistakes the computer makes, even when it's petty? Fuck that.